For the week of November 9th, this is what's coming up on CT Examiner Weekly.
I'm Nick Sambides with details of Stratford's new mayor, David Chess's ambitious plans to redevelop parts of the town.
Elections have consequences, and what does that mean for Stamford? I'm reporter Eric Oberauer with a look at how Stamford may end up approaching housing goals.
I'm reporter Robert Starachi with the latest on the new housing bill that was announced by the governor and legislators on November 7th.
And I'm Amy Wu with looking at the affordable housing situation in Groton and Stonington.
All that and more in this week's edition of CT Examiner Weekly, and also joining us around the table is Editor-in-Chief Greg Stroud. I'm your host Brian Scott Smith. Welcome to you all. Housing and affordable housing in the state has been a hot button issue for many years now, and earlier this year, a housing bill that many hoped would start to deal with the problem was abruptly stopped when Governor Lamont vetoed it. Greg Stroud, Editor-in-Chief of CT Examiner, kicks off the conversation about the politics surrounding the bill. Greg.
So, Brian, I think no doubt since CT Examiner launched 7 years ago, the two biggest pieces of legislation that we've tackled have been police accountability and housing affordability. And these two bills, both handled in special session, one in 2020 and now one in 2025. I think they're probably partisan hot buttons. They'll be big in the coming governor's race. And part of the question we have is, so you pass the bill, what's the reality on the ground? How does this really affect things in a market economy?
And also, this is something that has really dogged Governor Lamont in his second term as well.
Well, I mean, part of what we're looking at is a challenger on the left with Josh Elliott. When Lamont didn't pass this legislation, he was quite vocal about it. And on the right, we have Ryan Fazio. And certainly Ryan Fazio will look to make local control, housing, and energy the sort of big parts of his campaign, we think.
So on November 7th in East Hartford, after months of waiting, the governor and legislators announced details of a new housing bill that they will debate at a special session on November 12th and 13th. And our reporter, Robert Starachi, was at the press conference and joins us now. Robert, fill us in on some of the key details.
Thank you, Brian. So the biggest takeaway from the proposed housing bill, which we now have a copy of, is that the original fair share proposal that the governor vetoed in June is no longer in place. For the most part, it's out the window. In a nutshell, previously, the state was going to assign the towns a targeted number of new affordable housing units. They had to meet in 10 years or face possible loss of state funding. Now there's more of a regional approach with towns taking the lead to build housing and support via, this is important, via their council of governments.
So, Robert, I guess my question is, we've got a market-driven economy, right? We've got market-driven housing market. And so for 25 years, we had 830G on the books from 1990 to 2015, and essentially no one in Connecticut had even heard of it.
Right.
And for about 8 years, every town learned about it. And now less and less we hear about it. So without fair share, I sort of saw that they're kind of returning to 830G or this mechanism to get housing accomplished?
Yeah, that's in a nutshell. Yes, I guess fair share was the issue, and now it's gone. And a lot of the towns were saying that they were losing local control with fair share. So the big thing is there's going to be incentives for towns to build more housing. They're not going to be penalized if they don't have a certain number. It's going to be opt-in options and incentives. So that's a big issue here, that they won't be penalized. They will have incentives. And although still it's a very partisan issue, not one Republican is going to vote for this, is what we were told in our reporting. It's going to be all Democrats. The Republicans are still saying that COG is kind of taking the place of the states and is going to be kind of heavy-handed, where now they're going to be going to control, and the towns the Republicans say are not going to be in control.
There's more to this bill than fair share, though. There's the potential to reduce the housing, the requirements of parking.
Correct.
That's one thing that I know planners have always said, that excessive parking requirements, they're expensive, and they keep housing from being built. And the other was, I think the announcement, as I recall, was in the governor and about 20 people showed up to a vacant lot in East Hartford and said, basically, this will be a place that will have housing. And so part of the idea is to, as I understand it, is to take commercial properties and vacant commercial properties and potentially turn that into smaller housing developments. But I think that too has been trimmed back a little bit.
Yes, and well, let me go over to the parking first. So the big deal, and it's a basic thing. The compromise parking is going to reduce minimum off-street parking requirements for new housing developments with 24 units or less to 16 units or less. And this was something that a lot of the towns were asking for. They wanted to make it easier zoning for parking and more parking availability and accessibility. And this is something a lot of the town leaders, at least at the Friday press conference, were in favor of. Parking was a huge issue in a lot of communities in this state.
Yeah, I believe, wasn't it the first selectman of Guildford, I think, said, they've already
Matt Hoy, yes. It was a big issue for Matt, yes.
And he said it would just cause, even more of a problem there. As Greg was saying, a lot of people turned up, sort of like rallying behind, the housing, this new housing bill. I mean, there were some interesting faces there and some interesting comments that were coming out from some of these people. I mean,
right.
What were you sort of getting out of this?
Well, it's very, very interesting in that Laura Hoydick, is the first name, I believe it's Laura Hoydick. She's the president of CCM. She's also the mayor of Stratford. She actually lost, but she was there in her capacity as the mayor of Stratford. And she's a Republican. And there were a lot of Republicans. I counted around 5 Republicans at this press availability, all in favor of this, even though Republican lawmakers are all against it. It was just an interesting dynamic. And kind of some Republican lawmakers are telling me they kind of thought they maybe don't want to put their name to this, but that the Republican leaders are kind of being played in a bit, played somehow by the administration, that that this is not what the residents want.
I think one thing, and maybe when we talk to Amy and Eric, we can get a better sense. One of the difficulties certainly is that we have 169 towns. The economies in the Quiet Corner, for example, is a lot different than what we have in Fairfield County. There's a political component to that. And so actually we have sort of this new knowledge, because we've hired, CT Examiners hired 2 reporters from out of state. And of course, what's the first thing they have to do besides sign their contract is they have to find some place to live. And it's actually a great thing for me. It introduces every single reporter to this issue straight off the bat. And one is in Fairfield County, and that's Eric Obernower. And the other, Amy Wu, has found a place in Brantford, but was looking for someplace in southeastern Connecticut. Normally, most of our staff ends up in Middletown or New Haven.
Robert, thanks for your reporting. We know that you're going to be following the special session for us, so we'll be interested to find out how that goes. Now, one of the key organizations here in the state who have been pivotal in the housing bill discussions is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, CCM, who are the state's largest non-partisan organization of municipal leaders, representing towns and cities from all corners of the state. And joining us is their Director of Policy, Brian O'Connor. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for the invitation, the opportunity to discuss housing.
Now, talk to us about CCM's involvement in the housing bill discussions, because you were the point of contact for the organization in all of this.
It actually started during the session with House Bill 5002. A lot of the provisions that are actually going to be implemented into the special session bill, we advocated for, at least when it came to the fair share. We wanted that out. Ultimately, it was carved out. We did promote a regional approach, which is ultimately what is hopefully going to become law in the next couple of days.
One of the comments that came to us, I think through Robert Starachi's reporting, was an interview with Jason Rojas. Maybe Robert can help me on this, but he said there will be numbers. And we were looking for the numbers, and we were trying to figure out this regional approach and are there numbers behind it, or how does that work out? Because there was a bigger goal, I think, was it 113? Initially, it was 113,000 units. And so is that still a goal?
Yeah, the original, what came out through the Eco Northwest report and what was in 5002 was 120,000 units. And they were going to actually start with 25% of that and have towns, change their zoning to adapt to it. The regional approach, I think the beauty in it is that it's going to look at not only just the deeply affordable housing, which is 0 to 30% of the area median income, it's also going to look at market rate. And so we believe that number is more accurate and reflects what is actually needed in Connecticut. And we think it's a much lower number. If you look at how they're going to do it, they're going to look at their towns. They're going to look at their water and sewer infrastructure. They're going to look at transit hubs, look at job centers as well, doing the regional needs housing assessment. They're going to look at developable land as well. And then that's going to help determine the number that each of the communities is going to be targeted. Now, it doesn't mandate that they build it, but it does provide a target for them to aspire to.
So, I mean, this was one of the interesting things for me. The first two reporters I hired with CT Examiner actually gave them a map of light pollution from outer space. And then I gave them a second map, and it was of sewer infrastructure. And it was a 1-to-1 match. So you could actually see where sewers are from outer space in Connecticut. And so it gave us a sense of how important infrastructure is to development happening or not happening, or happening in perhaps a more or less environmentally sensitive way.
Yeah, if you don't have water and sewer, the density is greatly reduced. Many of the units, I think you can get up to, I think it's like 32 units just with no water and sewer. They're looking for a lot more than that. If you're looking at the targeting of either between 40,000 units up to 120,000 units.
Amy's got a question. Amy.
Hi, Brian. Really interesting. I'm also would love your insight. I'm wondering how the regional planning model could perhaps affect or change how southeastern towns, such as Groton and so forth, collaborate on workforce housing, especially near the defense industry jobs.
That'll definitely factor in. And I think that's an important point to bring up, is that it is going to look at the job centers. You're going to look at Groton, New London as probably the epicenter of those or housing developments to help accommodate the new employees that they have. And it'll probably stretch out up into Norwich area as well. I think the way they're going to look at it again is, okay, what do we need to do? Do we need to expand water and sewer in order to accommodate that housing growth? What do we already have in place to help place those workers into new homes? And then working with the employer, I think they're going to probably reach out to EB and basically say, how many employees do you expect to bring in and hire over the next 3 to 5 years, and then actually short term within the next year.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting discussion with obviously EB, because the amount of stuff that they do want to bring into the area, but also that the sewer and what you were talking about, because I was actually talking to Save the Sound the other day, and they've just released their annual bacteria monitoring report, and part of their issue is that they're saying is the infrastructure here in Connecticut is so old, it's crumbling, it's causing issues, sort of thing. So it's all very well wanting to build a load of houses, but if the infrastructure can't take it, you're already encountering problems. Greg?
This is one of the, it's, I think maybe the matrix of interest groups to make this work might be, from my perspective, from the reporting perspective, one of the challenges is, I remember 2 years ago having a conversation with Sarah Bronin, who at the time was sort of the leading force behind Desegregate CT, who has been the sort of vocal proponents, certainly, of affordable housing in Connecticut for the last 2 or 3 years. And I said, Sarah, we really need to update sewer, how we fund sewers, how we build. You need to focus on sewer. And she said, it's someone else's issue. And so I think one of the challenges I'll see is, how can the housing advocates get together and figure out a way for sewers? Because as far as I understand, most sewers in America are funded with clean water funds, and clean water funds specifically are meant to mitigate existing pollution and not to actually build new. They're not meant for development. They're meant for getting rid of pollution. And so I don't know how the funding will come about, but that will be one thing we'll be looking at.
Just wondering if I mentioned in the beginning that at the press conference, there were 5 Republicans in support of this, at least. No Republicans, lawmakers. Where's the disconnect? Why do you think no Republican lawmakers are supporting this when there are Republican municipal leaders supporting this? What's going on there, do you think?
I think they just have different roles. And, you look at the first selectman or mayor, they're trying to, get housing in. I think, when you talk to the different municipal leaders, they are looking for development. They're looking for growth. And I think they're comfortable with the process because they were part of the process, through CCM. And we did share it with them and got their input as we move through, the summer and fall process and negotiating. So I think there's probably a comfort level there. I think, if you look at the Republican leaders' comments and some of the ranking members on the Housing Committee, I think to them, it was about process. They didn't feel like they were engaged. They don't feel like their input was taken or even asked for. I wasn't privy to those conversations, so I'm not quite sure the exact nature of it, but I think that's where they're coming from. And the bill was released, 5 days ago. Is that enough time? Does it have a regular general session public hearing process? No. But again, at least we were able to, communicate our positions and got to see some of the language beforehand.
What I notice is there seems to be proponents of this new legislation are treating the reduced parking requirements and also the general trend toward transit-oriented hubs or transit-oriented housing as being a sign of progress. Calling me skeptical because our society, whether we like it or not, for the last half century or more, has been built around the automobile. And even people who need affordable housing, the majority of them have to drive cars to get to work unless they work in New York City. And a lot of the people who work in New York City probably earn good salaries. That's why they commute to New York City and probably don't need affordable housing. So the question I had is what is the use of affordable housing if you can't actually park there, which, let's face it, most people need to be able to do?
Well, I'm going to say, that's why we were adamant about trying to reduce that number to 6. We would have liked to have removed it altogether, but that, that's part of a negotiation. So they went down to 16. But the one provision that we were able to negotiate through, along with the governor's office, was the conservation and traffic mitigation districts. Each municipality can create 2 of these that are contiguous, where they can put in minimum parking standards. So it won't be just throughout the town. They'll be able to, protect that downtown area in Guilford, as First Selectman Hoey mentioned.
We're going to have to leave it there because unfortunately we do have to move on to some other stories. But Brian O'Connor from CCM, thank you for joining us. You're welcome to stay on the podcast because we've still got more stories to cover. Stratford's new mayor, Dr. David Chess, will be sworn in on December 9th, but isn't waiting until then to announce his ambitious agenda for the town, which includes housing development. And our reporter, Nick Sambides, joins us with the details. Nick.
Yeah, David Chess is nothing if not ambitious. He is in the final process now of putting together a transition team, selecting a chief of staff and so forth. And he's made phone calls to Rosa DeLauro, the governor, a bunch of other people, and looking to attack several problems simultaneously. He believes that he can market the town successfully and bring up the revenue it generates through that. And he also wants to improve the town's quality of life. And he has a plan, too, to work with neighborhoods to do both, to identify areas of improvement and things that they can do to make their neighborhoods better. It's an interesting thing to see happen because Stratford has not historically been known as either a great tourist place or it has been, because of Sikorsky, great for manufacturing, but it also has a lot of relics from that. So it kind of falls between 2 stools in that sense.
Correct.
So Nick, is the housing issue with Sikorsky sort of similar? Does it mirror the housing issue we're seeing around EB, which is this sort of really dearth of housing or this need? It's essentially impossible to rent an apartment in Groton at the moment. And I think Stratford's a little bit easier than that, but maybe more expensive.
Stratford's definitely a case of it being more expensive for less. They have had some successes with 830G in terms of getting housing built, but there's a long way to go for that to really have an effect. And what Stratford also has is a bunch of areas that are plainly undeveloped or relics. So there's a lot of work to be done to handle both problems at once. And it is certainly possible that he can do that, but it's a matter of marrying money to a given locale and hoping the process moves quickly.
So one of the things, certainly, and I think one of the changes that's interesting is this idea of mixed use. And maybe Brian can help us with this. But part of the way the bill changed initially was, I think you could take a commercially zoned building and you could convert it to housing. Now you can take a commercially zoned building and you can convert it to mixed use, as I understand it, and of a modest size. Is that correct, Brian?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's for 10 or more units. They do want to protect the downtowns. That was one of the concerns that we had, is that you're going to crowd out some of the commercial businesses that are already in place. And we didn't want to lose that commercial district. So the thought is let's keep the first floor commercial and build housing above it. The other thing I want to point out is that in the bill, there's $60 million for what they call gray revitalization or grayscale development. And that's for converting commercial properties to residential.
So one of the questions I had, and then maybe to redirect back to Nick, is that there's the difference between redeveloping sort of abandoned commercial buildings. We see quite a few of those, for example, in Stamford. And there's something else we'd see where, apartments around Guilford Green might be more profitable than those cute storefronts. And I don't think anyone had that in mind, certainly when they were proposing the legislation. So Nick, is in Stratford, do you see, what's the mix? Have you followed that conversation in terms of how much commercial real estate is there to redevelop? As I recall, there's quite a bit.
There is quite a bit, and there's also a lot of manufacturing. One of the biggest projects is the old aircraft engine plant. That's 77 acres. Mixed use is probably going to be seen there, but you're not going to know for 3 or 4 years because they have to clean it up first. That's one of Stratford's bigger problems too, is when you have properties that have been heavily industrialized, cleaning them up is important. Milford has had much more success with mixed use. What they're finding is that they have people, they build large buildings right in downtown, and they do have some of them, they all have 830G components, but the people who are living there are walking instead of driving, and they're able to go out and do a lot of things. There aren't a lot of grocery stores there, but the grocery stores are a short distance away. They're the Boston Post Road. That's within a few miles. So I don't know that you're going to see development without vehicles, like to get back to what Eric was talking about, but you are going to see shorter distance travel.
Nick, thanks ever so much for that. Again, appreciate your reporting on that. You're listening to CT Examiner Weekly as we discuss the special session and the new housing bill that's been announced. Now, we have two newish reporters, as Greg mentioned earlier, Eric and Amy. And our reporter, Eric Obernow, covers the Stamford area for CT Examiner. And before landing in Connecticut, used to live in New Jersey. And that state provided the regulatory idea behind Fair Share with the Mount Laurel decisions. Eric joins us now. Eric, talk to us a little bit about that, how that worked out in New Jersey.
Well, my first inclination is to say just hearing all these terms like fair share and so forth being tossed about gave me a sense of, deja vu all over again, so to speak. Everyone is for affordable housing. It's in much the same way everyone is for motherhood, apple pie, and Friday afternoons. But, you have to ask, what does that mean? Proponents of New Jersey's approach will tell you it's been a success. And in terms of achieving what have been mostly bureaucratically determined affordable housing benchmarks, I guess you could say it has, but it's also been a mostly piecemeal approach where a lot of towns have been very resistant and have really approached it more from a standpoint of risk mitigation in the sense of avoiding lawsuits rather than really having a proactive approach to trying to build affordable housing. We're now, the Mount Laurel, the first Mount Laurel decision was actually 50 years ago. And I think you'd be hard pressed to say that the approach that New Jersey has taken has really made a significant dent in the need for affordable housing. It's still, just like Southwest Connecticut, it's still one of the most expensive places to live in the country. I think the current legislation that's now up in Hartford seems de-emphasizing the carrot, de-emphasizing the stick and opting more for the carrot. But based on what I've seen in New Jersey, and I'm not saying which approach is the right way, but it's hard for me to believe that you're going to make a serious dent in the issue or in the need if you don't also have a stick at some point. I mean, that's just reality. And I think 50 years of experience in New Jersey shows that.
As we said, you cover the Stamford area. I know you haven't been there for long, but I mean, are you able to sort of like juxtaposition that to Stamford? Because Stamford is a relatively sort of like affluent area, but they're using things like old office buildings and turning them into housing. Can you sort of like just talk to us maybe a little bit about that?
Well, here's what I'll tell you, because I'm still getting my arms around a lot of this, but I can do this. When I said elections have consequences, I wasn't kidding. I wasn't being flippant. The current mayor of Stamford, soon to be in her second term, she may come to find out the meaning of be careful about what you wish for, because in her first term, she's been able to slide a little bit on the idea that her board of representatives has not been behind her, has not given her everything she wanted. Well, now she has. Her party has taken complete control of the board of representatives, so she's not going to be able to use that as an alibi anymore. I know that Stamford. I'll tell you this. I'll share with you this also. I kind of started off with having a pretty good relationship with the mayor's office. I reached out to them Friday, said I'd like to touch base with you early this week about housing. Got an acknowledgement Friday, and they've since gone totally dark on me, which leads me to believe that this is not something they necessarily are too eager to take on.
I mean, when I look at this city, and part of the reason why we've had so much coverage of Stamford is how many cities in America do they have the problem of too many wealthy people wanting to move there? I mean, there's a problem where all these, but the problem is they're from out of town. And so in the last election, I think what we saw, and I think Eric can confirm this, is the people that live in Stamford now said, what about us? Shouldn't you represent us first? And this issue of quality of life, congestion versus this, amazing stick of we could have thousands of wealthy people pay $4,000 a month to live in our town. We'd be crazy to turn them away. And Connecticut is it's really one of the few states that has no big city. And so does Connecticut need a big city? And if we're going to have one, is it Stamford?
I'll share with you this, that while it wasn't Stamford, it was just in a neighboring town, Norwalk. On election day, as I was going around to different polling places, I saw in Norwalk huge signs outside a polling place basically saying no more apartments, or stop all apartments. That seems to be the prevailing sentiment among a lot of people. I mean, in Norwalk, certainly, in Stamford too. I guarantee it. I know it because I've spoken to people who basically expressed that sentiment. And, here again, when we're talking affordable housing, I mean, most people need affordable housing. That's what they need are affordable apartments. And again, I come back to what I said about New Jersey. I just don't know. I don't know if you don't have a stick to make towns build affordable housing, if you're going to be able to achieve it.
Eric, I'm going to give a final comment to Nick.
Milford has had a lot of success with a lot of developments coming in, many of them mixed use, but I'm seeing the same thing that Eric is seeing, which is among residents, there are escalating amounts of complaints about traffic and about other forms of congestion, and they don't see, residents don't want it. The town has had a lot of success building this housing and filling it, no problems at all. It's being done very well, but you got to wonder when the backlash is going to get to a point where the residents really push hard, do something that form a protest, do something that really wakes people up to the idea that a lot of them just don't want their neighborhoods changing this much.
We've got our final segment on the podcast today. Amy Wu is also one of our new reporters as well, joins us as well around the table. And she's going to talk to us about the towns of Groton and Stonington that she covers. But before we get into that, again, as we did with Eric, some specifics about, you having to find, accommodation here. Talk to us about your thoughts about the Connecticut housing situation.
Well, I have many thoughts. I'm still trying to get my head around things. I am a transplant from the Hudson Valley region in New York, where I see actually quite a lot of similarities between the struggle to find housing, especially for the workforce. Where I was in I was in around the Red Hook, Rhinebeck area. So again, small towns, small villages, a lot of them up there. And also with the towns that I now cover, including Groton and Stonington. So I think some of this was sparked by COVID. We had certainly folks there that had two homes and then decided that they were going to make for example, the Hudson Valley home. And as a result, those living there, working there, renters were basically squeezed out and had to move further and further. So as the rents kind of skyrocketed. So I'm kind of looking at renters, but also eventually renters also are interested in buying as well.
Right.
So Amy, why Branford?
Brantford. So I shopped around a bit. I took a look at the proximity to CT Examiner. We're here in Old Lyme in the historic district. I looked at the commute, that big C word.
95.
95. Yes. And I did all kinds of kind of like map questing to see like how I would get here, trains, planes, automobiles. I'm joking about the planes. Did the mileage, and saw that, yes, 95 was the big place. So I said that Brantford was the fastest route to the office, but also for my family, some of them actually live in New York City, the closest probably to also the public transportation, which is the New Haven line to New York City and also the Amtrak. So a lot depends on the transportation as well when it comes to searching for housing.
Did you find Connecticut expensive compared to Rhinebeck, or just compared to or Hudson, or is it really kind of the same, or more driving, or what?
I'm personally finding it that the prices are about the same. Without going too deep, I was very fortunate pre-COVID to actually get into the rental market in the Hudson Valley. And that was a whole other world. So after kind of leaving that world, I look back at the place that I had, and it's actually the landlord has upped it by 50%. So I was quite fortunate. So those prices are matching the prices that I see in Connecticut. So, the rental market in the Brantford area and New Haven as well. So I was actually kind of shocked. This is my personal story.
Brian O'Connor from CCM, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, what the conversation's bringing to light too, another important component to the housing bill, and I think what is actually sort of a shortcoming of it all, I think we need more, is rental assistance programs, where you already have people housed, but where maybe a few years ago, maybe they were paying 30 to 40% of their income on housing. Now it's over 50%. So now the affordability issue that we've discussed earlier comes into play most prominently in acute point with their housing situation, that if you provide some voucher for it, they might actually have success either going into a new unit. You also have the first-time home buyer program, which hopefully will get more people into starter homes, which they're really not building anymore. So hopefully we could do more of that in the future.
Amy.
That certainly sounds positive. I was going to say that what I am seeing the parallel with Groton, certainly that I report on, is that there's a huge need for the what I call not so much affordable, the workforce. For example, Electric Boat is going to hire like 3,000 to 5,000 over the next several years as well. And there's a struggle to find those rental places. But in the city, they're also currently looking at developing or underused or basically abandoned buildings and schools to convert those, to extend those, for renters as well. And I will say something from the community standpoint of from the renter or the person who is part of the workforce, is that there is a real keenness to be a part of the community. So wanting walkability, wanting to be a part of the community, joining boards and commissions. I'm seeing that, there's a perception that, people who are renting are just there to rent and will move on. But what I am seeing is the incentive to bring in more rental properties is bringing in more community, and also allowing those people to have contribute to the community. Their kids are going to schools in the community, and eventually they are seeking to buy, and they're not really wanting to potentially move further and further and drive more and more to their workplaces either.
Yeah, I don't want to get into this particular topic too big, but it is connected to this. But childcare, and certainly here in Connecticut, and certainly in southeastern Connecticut, there is a huge lack of childcare spaces. But then also you're looking at the price of childcare as well. Greg, what did you want to say?
I mean, certainly to piggyback off of that, it's it's the broader point. I think the Republicans maybe brought it up a little more strongly at first, which was sort of holistic affordability. I think the Democrats have also embraced that, both on the state and federal level, which is this idea, well, you can have cheap housing, but what about energy? What about healthcare? Certainly healthcare as a business person myself, a small business owner paying 10% premium increases every year, that adds up. And so whether it's cheap to live or not. So certainly that's one of those cases where you can rob from Peter and pay Paul.
Well, thank you for the spirited conversations and discussions from everybody. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. It is a topic which clearly needs several podcasts to talk it through. But my thanks to Greg, Nick, Robert, Eric, Amy, and Brian O'Connor from CCM. Don't forget, you can read all the stories and our extensive coverage you've heard today, and also look at Robin's event calendar as well on the digital pages of ctexaminer.com. And don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on all of the week's essential news. This is CT Examiner Weekly, reporting and supporting what matters. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.